clan to clan. But it was always an extended period of time that was followed by a great time of feasting. And Jesus makes reference to this in parables and stories, where the bridegroom gathers together his party, if you will, and we still use some of that terminology, and he comes to claim his bride. And he might even come by night with torches, and the bride would be claimed by the bridegroom, and they would inaugurate a great period of rejoicing. And it was full of all of those things that we enjoy, family and friends and camaraderie, and catching up with those that one hadn't seen in a long time, maybe meeting new persons that one had never met. Maybe the other side of the family. People traveled far and wide, and even in this instance, we're told it's several days' journey, even though it would be short by our estimation, maybe 10 miles or so, but several days' journey by foot, and people gathered far and wide, and now the time of feasting, day by day by day, visiting, rejoicing, offering well wishes to the couple, and gifts. There always seem to be gifts at a wedding. And of course, good food and good wine. And it was considered obligatory for the one who offered the feast, the bridegroom and his family, to have enough on hand to supply all of the guests. Jesus, we're told, Mary, all of his family, including Jesus' disciples, are invited to the wedding. And that's a good place for us to begin. Now, we can make too much of it in the text, but it's significant that these are people that Jesus knows. And so he is an invited guest. Some have said, probably erroneously, that Jesus and his disciples might have crashed a wedding, to put it bluntly. Maybe they just showed up and Jesus used it as an occasion to do something that wowed those in attendance. But that's not exactly what John tells us. In fact, he makes a point of telling us that Jesus is an invited guest. Now, while we could make too much of that, that is an important point for you and I as we take this story to heart and learn from it how we might deepen our faith. Because after all, doesn't Jesus come as an invited guest? Jesus doesn't crash the party of our lives. Jesus doesn't force himself upon us. Even as we learn throughout the Gospels about his ministry, it is always an open invitation to come. Even with those whom Jesus interacts, it's always an invitation. And so Jesus asks those who are sick, do you want to be made whole? Jesus asks those who come for help, what is it that you would like me to do? And Jesus often waits for an invitation of sorts from those with whom he interacts. And so it is for us a starting place as we learn from this story, from this sign, that Jesus is an invited guest. And it benefits us to understand that in our life, in our faith, Jesus deserves to be an invited guest. Now, we'll learn later that anything might happen when Jesus is an invited guest, but he's worth inviting. And so we begin there. Jesus, an invited guest at a wedding. Well, it serves to reason that if Jesus and his family are invited guests, Mary, his mother, has a sense of responsibility in this wedding. Now, we don't know the extent of it, but somehow she is involved. Not only do they know the family, but she is involved. In fact, so involved that she's speaking to the servants, and she is aware that there is a problem. Somehow her responsibility may extend to even supplying some of those things needed for this extended feast. She realizes a problem is arising, and so she comes to Jesus. And she says, in essence, we have a little bit of a problem. Now, Jesus' reply may take us rather off guard. It seems a little cold. It seems even a little bit harsh. But that's an error in our understanding in the translation. In reality, Jesus' answer to her is respectful. He doesn't address her as Mary or mother, but woman. But that was a common respectful word and greeting in Jesus' day. So he says, woman, what is this to you and me? In other words, he's asking the question, what is this? What's the extent of your responsibility? What is it that you would like me to do? And then he's careful to caution her, though he has entered his public ministries, gathered around him some disciples. He realizes what she may be asking, and he says, this is not quite my time. Maybe Mary is just asking Jesus to be resourceful. Maybe she's asking for help among his friends and associates. Listen, this is a terrible social blunder. We have run out, not only of food, but more importantly, wine. We have run out. Can you do something? But probably she understands that Jesus can do something unexpected. And so she asks, can't you do something about this? Maybe you can offer a word of encouragement. Maybe you can say a prayer. Maybe something can happen here. But she certainly has an eye to knowing that Jesus can do something maybe no one else can. And Jesus tells her, my hour is not yet come. Now, if the story ended there, we might think that was it. Jesus saw that this was not the time and place, and the story would end. But that's not the case. In fact, we know that there is more. Mary knows there's more, so she tells the servants, listen, whatever he tells you to do, do it. She has an eye to Jesus doing something unexpected, something no one else can do. And so Jesus tells them to go and to fill these jars that were set aside for purification rites whenever the guests needed to wash their hands or some implement, a pitcher or a plate needed to be washed according to Old Testament regulations. This was the water that was used. And so Jesus tells them to fill it to the brim and then to draw it out and bring it to the steward, the one who ultimately is in charge, far beyond Mary, of this feast and celebration. And so they do it. Now the steward doesn't know. The bridegroom doesn't know. It's only the servants and Jesus' disciples who know. So Jesus has not made a public display of who he is and of what he's capable. But he has shown his glory, John says, to those around him. Not in the way probably Mary expected. Not in the way his disciples, looking back, would have expected a first miracle to occur, the first sign. But it happens. And that gives us the second point that we learn from this miracle. Jesus works in ways that are unexpected and yet miraculous in our lives as well. Think about this for just a moment. How often have we prayed for God to intervene in some way in our lives? Maybe we need a little miracle. Maybe we need a big miracle. But what happens next? And it happens with you. And it happens with me. It happens with all of us.